My name is CJ Johnson. I'm the composer for My Name is Alex. Actually, a friend had me write a few rock songs for one of his kind of joke movies, and I had the day off and was like, hey, do you mind if I just mess around with the rest of it? And all of a sudden I just started putting things to it because I had never really done synthesizers or messed around with the technology side of things besides recording, and just thought it would be fun. And then I noticed I had kind of a knack for it and really liked it, and it just kind of grew from there, and then it was an obsession. I wanted to say it was so liberating is why when I first started and noticed I had a knack for it, I was excited because it was one of those moments where it was like, oh, there's no limits here. It's not just a guitar and trying to think of songs in my head that are limited to certain instruments. Now, I can go anywhere with where I'm writing in my head and trying to translate it down. And that part was the most exciting and really kind of took off as soon as I was able to get better sounds, and just kind of learn more. And they, since I'm dealing with classical music, obviously there's going to be that metal undertone that's under there. And I do a lot of horror movies where action movies are aggressive. And I want to say that my style kind of lends to darker elements because I love all sorts of music, but I definitely feel more entrenched with the darker tone of things. But then I was able to do some beautiful things as well too. A piano is super expressive, and I never really messed around with all the options that you could do with that. And it was great to be able to not have any restrictions and do whatever I wanted to try. Well, usually I'll meet with the director, hopefully face to face. Usually I can read someone better when I'm face to face with them, but a phone call works as well too. And it really, it's a conversation of just what is going on inside their head and what they're thinking. Seeing if maybe I can connect to it on some level and understand where things will be going with it. I'm not one of those people that sees color with music, but I have this feeling that I can kind of touch base on that. If you're telling me that the story is taking place in this wooded area, maybe it's the daytime or things like that, I'm going to start thinking of different tones musically that I can bring out to try and aid that landscape. And really what I feel I excel at currently is bringing a landscape to it and an emotional vibe and an immersive experience. It really depends. I've scored a 10-minute film in 2 days once, and sometimes I've done it less than that. Usually I'm working on 3 or 4 different films at once because it keeps my brain fresh. And, if I'm not totally vibing with one film, I'll jump into another film and it just kind of crosses back and forth. And sometimes they actually even interplay with each other. So if I'm working on a horror movie and I've been really working on creating this dissonant tone with it, sometimes that can lend to if I'm doing a sci-fi piece or a dramatic element to it. And I've been wanting to bring it into the horror, but I know that I can't. So sometimes I'll just have inspiration that I can bring into that project. So honestly, working on several projects at once keeps my brain quick and just helps with inspiration. Well, basically, Jimmy had reached out to me, and Corey had reached out to me. I had both met them from recording Jimmy's podcast, the Movie Show Theater podcast, and I really enjoyed talking with both of them. They're excellent people, and I knew that I was in the same headspace as them creatively, where it could at least enter that world. So when they started talking to me about it, I knew we kind of liked similar things. I knew what kind of vibe that they were wanting. And so when they explained to me a little bit about the story, I had gotten the script, I kind of went off on a dash and just made a bunch of music as a sound palette, and ended up scrapping almost 80% of it and rewriting quite a bit, which happens, you have this image again built up in your head. So then once the picture came, I knew that I was close, but I wasn't there. It was just one of those things where it just didn't fit right. So luckily I was able to, some of the main themes I was able to hold on to because of just the vibe that it was. But then when I saw the film, I knew that I had to go back and redo some things. And generally, I like to do that anyways, just to see if anything sticks and I can snap back to that inspiration that I was at originally, where I made this palette of music to work with. But sometimes it doesn't work like that. It's fun to have different ways of doing it, either not seeing it, sending out a bunch of tracks and letting someone place them, or making sure I'm on the right ideas. Again, like it's about emotion. So if I'm touching that right emotion, what's in the filmmaker's head, they'll tell me, no, this isn't what I'm looking for, or this is absolutely what I'm looking for, and I'll know whether I'm on the right track. Alex and Deborah, when they meet, I try to kind of bring this little bit of salvation part for him, because he's trying so hard to just live life and get out of this experience that he's basically, miserable at the moment. So trying to lift out of that and have Deborah be this kind of hope that's there, and this lighter tone to his life that he's shooting for it, just to get out of that. I felt that was a real fun part to make, but you don't want to make it overly warm or fuzzy, because there hasn't been a real connection yet, and they're just starting to do that. So, whenever you try and better yourself in life, there's going to be a lot of challenges that go on, and it's not pretty at all sometimes. So I wanted to try and be able to snap back into, where he was at, and trying to build out Alex as a character with his music, because he's not just in this constant state of depression. Like, he's fighting for it, but when you're fighting for stuff, you get snapped back into it very easily. I think the most satisfying part was to see the final cut with all the music that I had, because I had cut some of the scenes off together and basically wrote to the scene. And then sometimes when you do that, it pulls you out of the full-length story of it. So when Corey and I came together and put the music against the picture in its finality, I guess that's a word, it really solidified that I was on the right track with the direction of where the music was going. There wasn't anything that stuck out like a sore thumb, and it even brought to the point where we had to add a few little pieces to kind of tie certain things together. That also kind of varies too. Like, every project is new, and I try and get in the headspace of the project. So with this one, I knew that it was going to be very electronic based, and I had watched Mr. Robot a couple years ago and really started to get into Matt Quayle. Matt Quayle had worked on a couple different films with Cliff Martinez. Cliff Martinez had done the soundtrack for Drive, Only God Forgives. They had kind of worked together, and I really liked the brooding tone that was really well placed with Mr. Robot. So during this, I was listening to a lot of the Mr. Robot soundtracks, which I highly recommend. But, some of the other stuff, I'm working on 2 horror films, and there's this Polish composer that is probably the most metal. He wrote this in the 60s and the 70s, and it's all just classical instrumentation, but it's the most metal thing I've ever heard. It's just so dissonant and disgusting and gross, and the time signatures change quite a bit. And then, movies inspire me. If I'm feeling in a rut, I'll go see a movie during the day, or, just get outside and try and pick up inspiration from other things, whether it's like a late night walk, or just walk around the neighborhood and grabbing some coffee. Like, inspiration can really strike from anywhere, and you never know when it's going to hit you, which is kind of the beautiful things. There's some days that I don't write anything. Like, I just am not in that headspace to write. And then suddenly the next day I write, 30 minutes worth of music or 40 minutes worth of music, and it could be all varying things. So definitely inspiration can come from anywhere, so I try to listen to a lot of different things. Just write, after you have that initial conversation with what they're going from, try and get inspired from that conversation. If you don't get inspired from that conversation, this might not be the field for you. It's one of those things where you have to feel something from the storyline that you can connect with, identify with, or understand, and then, just write something. And it can be completely wrong. I've written so many things that I'm like, that doesn't work at all after seeing the film. But just being able to have the ability to think of something and then put it down, and then you're happy with it, you could use that for another project or something. But at least like drawing on that inspiration from that conversation will dictate where, the creative process is going to go. Definitely, I grow to some degree from every project that I do. I've only had one project where I couldn't finish it because I just wasn't seeing eye to eye with the director, which generally that happens more so. And so in the 2 years that I've been doing it, I've been pretty lucky to work with some really great creative minds that I can meld with in some form or another and, deliver the best thing that I can. It's a challenge, and a wonderful challenge to really push myself and see how far, what my limitations are, and I'll find those by that film and then figure out a way to break through them or know, how to break them with the next film that I have. So every movie that I do, it pushes my skill set more and more, whether it's working better with atmosphere or if it's composing a bigger, more driven orchestral score or something like that. With My Name is Alex, it was much more fun. I think the timing was the part that really helped me grow the most. After writing to the different scenes and working with just a very rough cut, it was fun to challenge myself and then be like, well, when we put this all together, I really hope it works. And luckily it did, and we got a chance to mess with the levels a little bit and kind of nip and tuck it in there as best as we can. I met Jimmy 2 years ago. We both lived in the same town, but we had never met each other. I lived in Peoria, Illinois for about 6 years, and I knew who he was and I heard his name, but I had never gone up and introduced myself. It was almost in a comical fashion where it'd be I'd enter one area of the building and he would be leaving the other. So we didn't meet until we were both living in Chicago, and he needed someone to do a podcast for him, and my buddy, I'm pretty sure Norm, told him that I would record it for him. And then we just started talking about movies, and he's a movie fanatic, and I like to say that I am, not as much as him, he's bonkers for movies. But it was great to have conversations, and I really wanted to work with him just after hearing his passion for the movie, and he had told me that he was interested as well. And I'd met the director, Corey, and he was very passionate as well. I met them officially the same night, which is kind of funny, and Corey was from Peoria too, apparently. So it was great to just hear their conversation. It was about Do the Right Thing, and just hearing them both passionate about this Spike Lee movie, which is just hilarious to me. They had really knowledgeable input that I could identify with totally. Whenever I watch movies, you have those mental processes in your head, and it was nice to hear someone else saying those type of things that I could identify with. Corey definitely has a vision for what he wants and what he's seeing, and that's always huge. Not all directors know exactly what they want, and he's also very collaborative too. We can pitch ideas back and forth, and if it works, it works. We both know instantaneously whether it works or if it's just not. Something's just not there. So it's nice to be able to work with someone that you both can look over and be like, yeah, that worked perfectly. Corey likes to work very fast, and that was really great because it was instant input on yay or nay. It wasn't like waiting for an email for 3-4 hours and then getting this and having to go back with it. It was instantaneous, and I really enjoyed that experience. So then when we started to put the music to My Name is Alex against the film, it was even better. This is the first time I got to do music for him, for his film that he directed, which I was excited about. And it very similar workflow where it was quick, it was fast, and we tucked things in, and it's the instant gratification of like seeing it, you know, and having it in real time set against the picture was great.